All right. Welcome back to Why Wells Fail. Lloyd Brown. He's our man. How are you today, Lloyd?
I'm all the good, Steve.
All
And
right.
you?
I'm excellent now that we're recording, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, what we're wanting to do today is let's get the backstory on refined completions. This. This is a legacy play. This starts way back before you. Tell
That's
us about
true.
it.
Well, my parents met in the early 60s in Lubbock, Texas. They got married, and my dad had been a Reese Air Force guy. He was a chemist. He had two entrepreneurial endeavors while he was in the Air Force. One was he owned a laundromat, and the other one was he started dealing with hard water. West Texas has really hard water, and he bought a Service Soft franchise for water softening for homes, and got into that business. And um, when my parents got married in 1963, my dad had transitioned into the oil and gas industry. I was working with a gentleman in a company called United Chemical of New Mexico, and was in the water treating area, and decided to make an offer to buy the gentleman out. And that was right after I was born in 1964. And so we bought United Chemical, and it stayed the name United Chemical up until the mid 70s when he changed the name to Unichem International. And he did that because he had moved into relationships with companies in the North Sea and in Egypt and in different countries in the Middle East, along with being highly focused on the Permian Basin, and then ended up selling his company in 1979 to his the joint venture partner that he had overseas, called TR Oil Services, which was an English-owned firm, and stayed on to run the company until he passed away in a car wreck in 1984. I was a 20-year-old college student. At that time, I was actually at the University of Oklahoma and ended up transferring to Lubbock and to Texas Tech, and got a degree in petroleum land management. And my timing was just fantastic because it was in the spring of 1987 when the bust of all busts happened in the oil and gas industry. And I could not find a job to save my life. I went from having three job offers in January of 87 to when I graduated in May, nothing. And I was starving as an independent landman. And the gentleman that followed my dad called me up and said, "Hey, Lloyd, I hear you're starving. Why don't you come in and see me?" And so I went in to see a gentleman named Jim Britton, and I interviewed with two different divisions. One was the industrial division, and the other was the production division. And the industrial division did a lot of work in water treating and refineries. And through Jim's guidance, that's the one I chose. And here I am off to the races in the oil and gas business, but more in the industrial side. And I learned a lot about industrial water treating. And today a lot of the knowledge that I have started in understanding the complications and challenges you have in treating large volumes of industrial water, predominantly in refineries, from boilers, cooling towers, and wastewater. And as I moved up in the company, I was transferred to Amarillo, Texas, and this was in the late 80s. This was 1988, and there was a big transition happening in the industry on the industrial side. A lot of gas plants were closing. We had business in transportation in the natural gas pipeline segment. I started learning a lot about that. Ended up pivoting into the refinery process chemicals. And then because we needed as much business as possible, we started doing production treating, and became the first company to use what's called chlorine dioxide in produced waters. We patented the first mobile generator, and that was on to another part of the history.
Why
Got
is,
involved.
I,
Go ahead.
so why is chlorine dioxide an important thing?
Today, we utilize it to recycle produced water and clean it up to use as frack water again. So it's very important in recycling. Back then, we were utilizing it to kill bacteria in cooling water. And the funny thing is, we also were using it in oil field injection water. There was a plant in Spearman, Texas. We took the wastewater effluent from the city of Spearman, treated it with chlorine dioxide, and then it was sold to an oil and gas producer there in a water flood and pumped into an oil filled water flood. And so it's crazy how we got started there. And then this was in the mid 1990s, a good 5 years before really fracking took off in the natural gas space, and a good 15 to 20 years before we ever started recycling water at the levels. But gaining that understanding really helped us in the process. I stayed with Unichem until 2002, and I went and gloriously failed as leading a large earth moving construction company. I got humbled very quickly in 2 short years, and that led to going to work in the risk management business, again, predominantly focused on oil and gas. And in July of 2008, 2 of the people that I'd worked with, a gentleman named Scott Jones and Jeff Snyder, contacted me and said that they wanted to start their own oil field chemical business. And that was the birth of a company named Smart Chemical. I raised $1 million in about 15 days. I wrote a business plan, raised the money. Now, it didn't hurt that oil was $138 a barrel and natural gas was 13, and we per MCF. And so, I mean, we're off to the races, right? And our timing was wonderful. We did $250,000 in revenue our first month. And then that was August of 2008. And then September, the end of it, is when we had the wonderful Lehman Brothers collapse, leading to January of 2009, where oil was, Jiminy, I think it was down to $30 a barrel, and natural gas was at $3. And we struggled and had been so successful. At the end of September of 2009, my partner said not one red cent more, and we were on the verge of bankruptcy. And that's when the water treating part of fracking really showed up. We started working with a company called Exco in the Haynesville in Louisiana and East Texas. And from the end of September to the end of the year, we went from being $1 million in the hole into breaking even, and really did not look back from there, and grew dynamically, first focusing on fracking in natural gas regions, East Texas, in Pennsylvania. And then in 2012, those areas really started slowing down, and we moved heavily into the Permian Basin, where we still reside today as refined. We had exponential growth from really 2010 through 2018. We exited the company, or sold to a private equity group in December of 2018. Our annual revenues were in excess of $100 million at that time. And I decided that I was going to stay heavily invested and run the company with my new private equity partners. And Scott Jones and Jeff decided to do the same. And our original investing partners exited the business, and we were basically felt like starting all over again, and had one of those we did not have a real good experience with private equity. And in March of 2020, actually last Friday was the 28th, was 5 years to the day that I was let go as the CEO of Smart Chemical, which at the time felt like death, but ultimately was one of the greatest gifts that I could have ever received, and led me on a path from being smart to becoming refined.
I love that.
So this last May, 2024, negotiated with our now former partners to purchase the completions division. And we started the company called Refined Completions, and here we are today.
So refined completions shows back up, refined from the furnace. You went through some things. What was the main reason that when you told me you were starting this back up, I couldn't believe that you were going to go back into this rough and tumble world that had been so many lessons that I saw you go through. Why in the world did you grab this opportunity with, what did you see and why?
Well, first, I think the biggest thing, Steve, that I saw was the ability to take all the things that I'd learned being a coach for the last 4 years and how to create value around a company. And it's not being a commodity, it's being highly focused on providing a level of service and capabilities that are completely unique in the industry. And I knew we had the ability to do that. And we believed that we had a process that would help our customers make more oil and gas while reducing their lease operating expense. And so much so that we started the process of patenting this process that we had, and learned that our process patent in Europe is about to be released, and so, which is super exciting. And there's a lot of real value behind that. It validated what we believed we could do from all the years of learning, all the way really back from what we started learning in industrial water treating through the highs and lows of being in the oil and gas business, and the importance of starting with the right water, which creates the right treating fluid, which impacts the geology, and the theory of utilizing the law of equilibrium, and studying what the disruption that happened during fracking to that equilibrium, which is unique and novel, and the patent office agrees with us. And so, which is really, really cool. So that's really how we came to where we are and why we jumped back into it. And I wanted the opportunity to lead differently.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be more of a teacher than a teller. I wanted to become and I wanted the company and what we do to be focused on keeping a promise, by making a promise and keeping a promise. And the only way you can do that is if you have a process that brings predictability. And so we've done that. We've developed a process that predicts what is going to happen based on providing a total comprehensive solution to the things that keep us from making more oil and gas. And that comprehensive solution now is called the Pathfinder Process. And through that, we use a multifunction program. I hate calling it a product, but you have to have a product to sell, right? Unless you're licensing it, but this multifunction program that is now a total comprehensive solution called ShellFlow. And with that, we now have the ability to make adjustments in that comprehensive solution to what the specific geology that our customer's targeting, and create a real value for them, because we've gone from being a commodity focused on selling a product to a company that has a process that provides a total comprehensive solution.
One of the themes I've seen, and obviously, I know I was with you there in the smart chemical experience, but I've seen you go from being a chemical sales to really a process where you're helping the companies that you serve run their business better in this area. That's very important. You're helping them create an asset that's going to be even more valuable. And so it's from being a here, put me in that little cog and that all of that process to let me help you level up your whole experience here. It really seems to me that you're going, hey, I understand there's a big investment here, and you have to answer to your stakeholders, and we can help. We can help you really shine, be successful in that.
And it's understanding what's more capital effective and efficient as a business person. Mm-hmm. When I look at it, am I better off making an investment in the asset that is depreciating versus creating something that has a long-term operating expense? And that's our solution, focuses on making the best investment to provide a well that produces oil and gas at the lowest possible cost over the longest amount of time. And that's the real genius behind understanding the disruption that happens during fracking. Mm-hmm. Because we're able to formulate and understand the things that we need to do to put a dynamic equilibrium on that geology that doesn't shut it off from producing oil and gas. It still allows that to be harvested, but it eliminates or dramatically minimizes the carbon dioxide that's produced by the well, the H2S or hydrogen sulfide gas that's produced by the well, and any fines that would be coming off in the form of swellable clays and or migratable clays and fines like illite. So it's that comprehensiveness that we're doing, really understanding how do we help our customers. It's funny, my family, we have some mineral interests that my parents, when we were kids, they made all this investment in southeast New Mexico, in Lee County and Eddy County, New Mexico, which happen to be the hottest spots in the country now. And we have some working interest in some old wells there that have given us the opportunity to participate in new wells coming on. And when I look at some of the AFEs for these wells, there's a package of them that are $13 million. AFE. Well, an AFE, an authority for expenditure. And as a partner, a working interest owner, I get to see these and make a decision on behalf of my family, my sisters and myself, on are we going to invest in this or not? And so when you're talking about, some of them I've looked at are $17 million a well, but let's just use 13 because it's the smaller and easier number. Would you spend $100,000 more to protect that $13 million investment? Or would you rather have that $13 million investment be encumbered by having to pay the price of not spending that $100,000, but the cost of not creating dynamic equilibrium is tens of thousands of dollars a month for the life of the well. And these wells are, you know, economically, you're looking at a 5 to 7 year window that the primary operator is going to have, and then many times they'll sell those off as the wells get older. But why would you not make an investment that saves you on average $10,000 to $20,000 a month of operating expense, which that's less than a 1 year payoff, by the way. And our studies are showing that it's about a 90-day payoff, because not only do we lower the operating costs, but we produce more oil and gas. And so you're getting a combined investment return. Now, the problem is this. Our industry is known, the chemical solution industry is known as snake oil salesmen. And rightfully so, because we've always looked for a product to provide the solution, not a process. We've always looked at one component, having that silver bullet, you know, like we're going to go kill the werewolf. Well, you know what? They keep coming back to life because you're not addressing everything. And that's the difference today, is that we're looking, and we have patented the way to suppress the negative impacts of fracking to produce more oil and gas.
You know, are you familiar with the concept of velocity banking?
I don't think I am.
All right. So I've been studying about this, and, you know, when people buy a home, they get a mortgage and it's amortized, and you're paying a certain amount of interest every month, and you pay more interest in the beginning, and it goes, and then they cross whatever. But if you had gone, so those mortgages, you know, they're attractive because low interest rate. We've been trained to focus on the interest rate. But then if you were just to go to get a line of credit at a higher interest rate, and you just paid the same payment that you would as the home payment that in a mortgage, you would pay that home off in 5 to 7 years instead of 30. And when you're talking about this concept,
right?
We've all been trained in your industry to think one thing, the silver bullet, the interest rate. But if they only knew that there was a different process where you're reaching your payoff much faster. It's the same concept, but they call it velocity banking. I didn't know anything about it, and here I'm older than you, Lloyd, and I'm just.
But we do that in business all the time. We utilize operating lines of credit, and the additional margin that we make within the business, we can pay it off faster.
Yes.
Than we would a fixed low interest note, and it gives us the ability to go grow the business. And I understand. I did not know the term, but it makes perfect sense.
But it's the concept that I see these unrelated but yet same concepts happening, and you have one in this fracking. You're reducing this ignorance tax, if you will, and maybe that's not attractive or sexy, but there's this tax of thinking about a system a certain way. If we would just stop for a minute and consider this extra 100,000 up front, long-term payoff.
Yeah. And, you know, to give everybody the credit, we've been trained to get things to pay off really quick. And that's why there's been this desire to get the wells and find our highest initial production as fast as we possibly can, because we're looking at getting that debt paid off really quick. Instead of our process, it's only about 90 days delayed to pay off the well. But the thing is when our IPs tend to be higher, and the wells tend to stay producing more oil for a longer period, to the tune that the last 10 well study that we did, the 5 wells that use our process versus the 5 wells that use the industry, our wells on average make $4.5 million more over a 2-year time frame. And in that study, it was a $75,000 difference to do it the refined process way or to do it the industry way. And the industry way is to do it as cheap as you can. And it's based on the belief, by the way, the belief is right. If the belief of using a single product to give you a high rate of return like that is, companies are accurate in believing that that is not valuable, because we can prove that you can use a single product to focus on one quote unquote problem, and it exacerbates all of the other issues, creating higher lease operating expense. Although you paid it off earlier, or you got more to pay it off, but your rate of return over time is much, much lower. And that cost is, it's through the roof. I mean, we're talking millions of dollars in a relatively short 24-month window. And as we go into, like right now, oil today's at $60. It's even more important to be capital effective and efficient when we complete the well. Again, those are deductible capital dollars in the form of depreciation versus having a higher lease operating expense, which makes the margin between what we sell our oil for and the cost of producing that oil and gas. If you go the inexpensive, quote unquote, the cheap way, that margin shrinks dramatically. And so your profitability is hit very, very hard by trying to save a few $1,000s. As a matter of fact, I think I was looking at the percent. If it was $100,000 on a $13 million well, that is 7.6%. No, 0.76% of the cost of the well.
Yeah, it's like putting a little chrome on a Harley Davidson.
That's exactly right. Except Harleys depreciate, and
right,
they're 100% expense. They're not an asset. They're fun.
So, one of the themes you want to protect the reputation. That's really important in your relationships here. The silver bullet trap or promise is what gets you in, makes you vulnerable to in a decision process that could be costly in a long-term way, right?
Absolutely. And what's funny is, there's no one size fits all. And on these wells, you're going to have areas that the target geology based on a geologic age is going to be very similar. And those, once you dial in your solution, you pretty much can stay there. But like in the Delaware Basin in Lee County, New Mexico, Eddy County, New Mexico, going down into Reeves and Pecos counties, you're talking right now we have between 7 and 11 different producing target zones. And they're all different. And taking one solution for one zone and applying it to another, it's malpractice, quite frankly.
Yeah. So that's amazing. Started studying about water. Your dad did.
Yep.
And then here it's like one of the major aspects of the predictive process.
It really did start with, and he was into how to mitigate and manage hardness in water, right?
Yeah.
And then move through his claim to fame. His company's claim to fame is they created a non-metallic scale inhibitor based on phosphate, and utilizing that in the oil and gas industry. And that was a real transformative discovery that they had, which was on the water side. And we likewise have a discovery that has led to our process. And it's understanding how to design this fluid to impact the geology to make more oil and gas. And same industry, though.
I'm curious, between your father and you and all of your experience on oil wells, I wonder how many oil wells you guys have impacted combined, that legacy of
Wow.
experience or knowledge, or what do you call it? Your experience stack.
Yeah. Well, and we're standing on the shoulders of so many people that took the time, effort, and energy to teach us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're bringing up a great point, is that where we are today is a compounding of learning of some unbelievable people in my life, starting with my father, and so many people that my first relationships were because of him. And it's pretty special.
Yeah. What a great story, man. I love the theme from smart to refined.
I wish I could claim that. My partner, Jeff Snyder, he's the one that he made that statement one day, and he goes, yeah, once we were smart, but now we're refined. And man, it's just, I gotta give him the props on that. That was his coin statement.
Excellent. Refined completions. Lloyd Brown, great conversation as usual, man. Looking forward to the next one.
Me as well.
All right.